Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording, and to elders both past, present and emerging. So, change management, change leadership. So what's all this analysis about? When we talk about change, there is needing to be a fundamental understanding regarding who's impacted, how they're impacted, what you're looking to achieve with the change, how you can measure and provide feedback through the change. So I have found that having some analytical capability certainly helps. And in my career, starting in marketing, the ability to segment audiences, understand demographics, target markets from a marketing perspective has helped being able to frame change up and look for those areas where there's a lot of commonality so that I can group certain impacted groups, I guess, not just on department, but also other characteristics, and then frame up the change in relation to that. And let me give you a couple of examples through my career of change that I've managed where I have looked at not just the impacts, but how you segment. Because I think a lot of people who are starting out, when it comes to impact assessments, they start to get confused and they get lost down a bit of an analysis wormhole when it comes to the change. So I try to simplify it somewhat. And there's no easy solve for this, but the approach for segmentation and looking for key groups and commonality amongst those groups, and thinking about, even from a marketing perspective, when looking at campaigns, there were certain behaviours you wanted from clients, customers, when you're doing a campaign, certain actions you want them to take. So thus, a lot of change comms has a lot of call to action and behavioural communication, and that lent itself a lot to my origin story of having a degree in marketing. And over time, I think that mindset and framework has put any change that I've worked on, I've just seen it through that lens, and it has helped because it's been more directive and purposeful around communication. Certainly not a one-size-fits-all, because that doesn't work. And thinking about nudging of behaviour, which is exactly what you want from change. You want to habit stack, you want people to get on board with the momentum that you've got with your change and really embrace it, and you also want to play feedback back to them. So let's go through some of the analytical points that may help you in viewing those who are impacted. One of the first views from an analysis perspective is going to be from a departmental perspective or a customer segment perspective, depending on if your change impacts customers, if it impacts suppliers. There will be some commonalities that you will find as threads. The easiest one from an internal organisation perspective is the structure. So what departments are impacted, how big are those departments, how many people in those areas, but then also looking at the process flows across the organisation which are impacted as a result of the change. So what core business functions might be impacted? For example, if you're introducing a workflow tool where no longer do people need to pass paper, email contracts, email procurement contracts, but they're all on a system. The processes you're looking at is who handles those at different points in that cycle, and how is that being automated, who's impacted as a result of that. and who do you need to communicate as part of that, but also engage and do some briefings if the system's intuitive, or where do you need to train people if the system isn't intuitive. And so you're looking at it through a process perspective, but then you're also relating that back to your org structure. You relate it back to the org structure so you can trace the leadership layers, because those leaders are going to be pivotal in reinforcing the behaviour that you want. So it's a bit of a cross-reference to that, ensuring that you're capturing that departmental impact, the processes that are impacted, and once again, the leadership layers that are impacted. So that's one group of analysis that you would always do if you've got an internal change, so that you can, once again, tailor the change plan exactly to those groups. The second area, if you're obviously going to be impacting customer segments or supplier segments, you really want to get an idea of which customers are impacted. Is it because they hold a certain policy related to this process? If it's a change in procurement process, it'll be suppliers that are impacted, and which groups or tiers of suppliers will be impacted the most. Might be certain rules for certain groups. Is there any sort of legacy or existing holders of procurement contracts who will be impacted in a different way? And so that type of analysis needs to occur so that you can communicate appropriately. If I'm someone who's got an existing contract, for example, versus those who might tender for future contracts. So you get a bit of an idea around the life cycle process, and that is really important, again, from an analysis perspective. When you're thinking about life cycles within organisations, it can be contracts, for example. It could be insurance policies if you're in insurance landscape, so policyholders who are up for renewal, or those who have the initial policy where you have that bit of grace period and therefore they're not contractually obliged, but you want to communicate to them any change in terms of conditions. If you're thinking about those who are longer term renewal customers, or those who are in the first year of their policy, you might want to approach that differently regarding communication so that you can make sure that you continue to get tenure on that policy. So once again, you can start to get an idea of the importance of life cycle, and whether you're an employee and you've got an employee life cycle that's impacted, or you've just got a change happening where new systems coming into play, and you need to consider not just existing employees, but also new employees who will join the organisation, and what's their onboarding journey, and make sure that they are onboarded into that system. These are the things that matter from an analysis standpoint, and it forms up that change story. And if you're working on a change and you haven't considered that, now is exactly the time to start considering that in your impact assessment. So people can underbake it when they just think about the departments who are impacted. They can underbake it if they think about only the system itself and not the processes that are impacted, and then the flow on impact, not just from the life cycle perspective, but also if you have other customer or supplier groups or any other stakeholders, external stakeholders who may be impacted. And thinking more broadly in that macro level ensures that you will get the right impact assessment completed. And like all things when I talk about impact assessment, it is the engine room of a change. And you may not, in your initial impact assessment, cover some of those things that you will find out as you go through and you start to form up the communication. So always cycle back around, update your impact assessment, make sure that your change plan is including and covering all of the interventions. But they're kind of the two levels that I tend to do an impact assessment on. Broadly, groups, then processes, then thinking about life cycles, the typical life cycle, whether it's signing up for a system, signing up for access, through renewal of access if that's required, through offboarding. That entire process needs to be mapped out and validated regarding its impacts. That's why analysis is really key. If you're doing a big network change, and certainly in my career working in banking, the branch network that exists and changes that happen there was a lot of analysis done, especially in any sort of structure or role changes, to the size of the branches, the number of people who are there, the tenure of the people, a bit of that staffing profile, the sizing landscape and then the geography and the markets that they serve. Understanding that landscape could help you have a really good current state picture and understand better the level of communication that you will require in each area. And for some of the banks that I've worked with, which are national, each state and the branch network is different, and taking that into account was really, really critical. Again, making sure that it wasn't just a one size fits all, but that you got a sense of the different groups, and getting sound bites from those sessions as well really helped to bring to life some of the feedback and some of the analysis that was done when looking at structure changes, etc., and process changes and system changes, and bring it to life. It always helps that it's not just words written on a page, but actually a voice that is spoken, and getting the okay to do that. And certainly I went to the extreme degree, but I think a very powerful need in one of the banks that I worked in when I was doing change and structure change and process change, to really get a first-hand experience of some of the sessions and what was spoken about in the sessions, so that she got a sense of the conversations taking place. And I think it was really important because it brought to life the discussions and also the passion that was within the branches, but also the support for some of the changes and the ideas that they had. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I've done that not necessarily in a recorded sense in other sessions, but certainly attended sessions in other projects and transformations that I've worked on. And it's important to be in the room often, because you do get a sense of not just of the discussion, but of the importance and emphasis on certain points and themes that may come up across the similar groups that you really do want to bring to the fore when you're talking about kind of current state and current behaviours. So the other reason why analysis is powerful in this sense as well, and understanding size, is also relating it to if you're impacting income generating functions or sales functions, is that you want to ensure continuity. I mean, change is all about ensuring that there is continuity in the business and that any impact on productivity is minimized as much as possible or shortened in its time span, right? So you want continuity of service. And if your change that you're introducing breaks that, then it becomes a huge, huge issue if your business can't do business because of a change that you're making. And so understanding the flow of the economies within your organization, so where do sales come in, who are the biggest sales areas, income generating, knowing that just from a general view of your organization is critical. And if you're introducing change into an area that really is income generating and strong in the business, you want to ensure that the change is as smooth as possible, because if there's any business disruption, it could be terminal for you, for your change and for your project. And so you want to ensure that if it is a high income generating area, then you're making sure, and I've had this with private banking, working in the private banking area, and certainly working on the change with private banking clients internationally, is that the change that we worked on was really handled well, supported well, but I really ensured that the planning was there when moving some high value clients to more of a telephone based service model, and making sure that it was fully specced out around the customer service that they received, so that we didn't have any attrition as a result of the change or the move. And that was quite a big change, of course, and worked really, really closely with the call centre at the time to ensure that that service model was really tight, and saw that customers were happy with the level of service they were getting, and in fact, in some cases, receiving more service than they had before. So that made them very happy. From a tiering perspective, we want to ensure that, as I mentioned, that there wasn't high attrition as a result of the change. And it gives a sense of perspective on your change when you know the economics of the organisation. Also means that if there's an area where that isn't the case, then there may be a more relaxed view regarding the change and the implementation of the change from management, because it's not a business critical function. And just understanding that really helps you be able to manage the risk effectively, but also the level of engagement, especially if there are bigger things happening in the organisation at the same time as your change. So understand that economic landscape, and know that when people talk about from an analytical perspective, people may talk about percentages around the number of people. There's only 2 people, yes, but those 2 people are our highest income generating areas in the organisation. Therefore, we need to ensure that they're well supported. So you can't just really look at it from a binary perspective and say, oh yeah, 2 people, this is what that means. You need to ensure that you have really fully analysed the impact through that lens to ensure that you're managing risk correctly. So we've talked a little bit again about the profile, like if you've got a business area, there could be a certain profile tenure which will impact the approach that you take. So measuring, analysis, measurements, success measures, analysis of issues, analysis of behaviours, analysis and feedback of training that has been implemented, different checkpoints. You don't over-analyse, but you're capturing data to play it back and to see where there are themes, and so you can adapt your plan as you go along. So that's why it's important to have a bit of an analyst hat on, so that you can really create the prime environment and create that environment for success, of which a lot of analysis really contributes to. And for the stakeholders who you might be working with who might dismiss it, if there's not data available, oftentimes it can just is trying to find anything else that is available. If you put the intention out there and you say, this is what I was thinking from a theory perspective, do you think, or a hypothesis around the behaviours that we might need to put into play? Is there any way we measure that at the moment? No, we don't. Okay, so once the solution goes in place, is there any way we can measure it going forward? Has that been factored in? And then maybe even on the existing, and to get a baseline, you might just observe, or is there anyone I can sit with so I can get an idea of kind of how long this type or part of the process takes. These are the type of questions and the curiosity that you need to have, not to be trying to hang on to something like a dog with a bone, just really keep going at something to try and find some measures, but just think about it in a lateral sense. Think about it from the whole process sense around there might be certain touch points that you can measure to and from, which are within the organisation's control. It's just worth asking the question, and then as you go through the process and everyone understands the impacts, then have a session on your success measures so that you can talk about dashboards, reporting, what that might look like, what you're hoping to achieve. Within what time frame do you want people to essentially pick up the new process? What type of reporting would you have to show that the policy that's been put into place is working? So many things. And at what point after the change? Could be a month after, not just 2 weeks after, where it's more relevant, and that you might just do a 2-week pulse check. So these are the things you want to form up. Analysis is definitely required for change, and you might be sitting there thinking, geez, I thought it was all about people. Well, it is, but as you will know, in this world of AI, in the world of algorithms and how the world works now, is the mathematical aspect of people's behaviour has always been there. And obviously we're finding that these avenues and the algorithm world is really using that data to nudge people's behaviour consciously and unconsciously. And yet we've been sitting in organisations and haven't really measured things, or thought that they couldn't be measured when it came to people. And there's nothing that could be further from the truth. And so I really want to dispel that myth. I've been trying to dispel that myth for 5 seasons when I talk about, for change, that you can measure it, that you can have a dashboard, that it can be quantifiable. And obviously in the world of AI and algorithms, that's exactly what they've known and been using. So just be aware of that. This absolutely, that change and analysis, it's the balance, right? It's the EQ with the IQ. And this is what we're talking about today. So if you haven't brushed up on your analyst skills, maybe start looking at behavioural theory, maybe start to look at the measures across the organisation, the KPIs themselves across an organisation, and consider what you might want to measure for your change. You might even want to pop a prompt into AI to talk about what measures would be applicable for the change that you're introducing, just as a starting point, so you can evolve it from there and go and have those curious conversations to see how you can build them out. But I hope this helps. I hope some of the examples bring to life options for you. And of course, come to myvirtualchangemanager.com, sign up for our newsletter, keep in touch, because we run training, and this is the type of topics that we cover, because measuring success of change is something that builds the credibility of the practice in the first place. But regardless of whether you're in projects or regardless of whether you're introducing change because of your role in an organisation, the change frameworks that we talk about, but most importantly the change approach that we talk about, which is your approach, is something that will help you be able to implement change, not just for today but for tomorrow as well. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and just remember that change matters, because you, your organisation, your team, your community, it all matters. Have a great day.